Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Innistrad Crimson Vow spoilers, and we've reached day 2 of spoiler season, and do we have some stuff to talk about today. We got a bunch of mythics, we got Planeswalker number 2, tons of amazing stuff, which means we should probably jump right into it. Start talking sweet new Magic cards. But before we do, 2 quick reminders. One is, if you want to keep up on all the latest spoilers throughout the day, you can find them all sortable, filterable, all that good stuff over at MTGPreviews.com. Number 2 is, our video today is brought to you by our awesome sponsor, Card Kingdom. And if you need to pick up some Innistrad Crimson Vow cards, or really any cards, you can snag them over at cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish and even get a free MTG Goldfish sticker. Let them know you want one in your order notes and they'll hook you up for free. So thank you to Card Kingdom for supporting the show. And let's talk spicy new Innistrad Midnight Hunt cards. So first up today, we got the card y'all have been waiting for, Alchemist Gambit. And Wizards is really good at a lot of things. Sometimes they're really bad at reading the room when it comes to the cards that they design. Although, honestly, we'll talk about this more as we go along, but Wizards works like a year or more ahead as far as set design. So there's really not much they can do to change cards in a set super quickly in response to how players are feeling about things, in response to players' feedback. But anyway, Alchemist Gambit, 3 mana red sorcery. Take an extra turn after this one, everyone's favorite line of text in Standard at the moment. During that turn, damage can't be prevented, and then at the beginning of that turn's end step, you lose a game and you exile Alchemist Gambit. So I gotta say, when you just read this part of Alchemist Gambit, it's actually a fine card. I like the extra turn spells with the lose the game drawback. They are normally not very easy to play. You got to really go deep to build around them to take advantage of them. And we've seen like Last Chance and Final Fortune, Chance for Glory. These spells have all been fine. They haven't broken anything. Sometimes they make for a good against the odds episode. However, Alchemist Gambit is more than that. Alchemist Gambit has cleave of 4 double blue and red, so 7 mana in the Izzet colors. And if you cleave something, you remove the words in brackets. In this case, it's the drawback of losing the game. So Alchemist Gambit is also just another Izzet extra turn spell. It is the return of Alrund's Epiphany. Thankfully, not as good as Alrund's Epiphany. It's not making birds. It's not being foretold. You're never going to cast it with the cleave mode for 6 mana. So it's not as good, but this card still really scares me in Standard for one really big reason. And that reason is we already have the Alrund's Epiphany decks at the top of the meta, and this just makes them more redundant. This isn't going to replace Alrund's Epiphany, but if you're all in on taking extra turns, you can easily play a couple of Alchemist Gambits, and now you have 6 extra turn spells. Or maybe you play all 8 of them, and you just have so much redundancy that you're always going to have the extra turn spell once you get enough mana to cast it. So, boy, more extra turns in Standard is the opposite of what I was hoping for, in all honesty. So on one hand, I like aspects of Alchemist Gambit, but I dislike that it's yet another extra turn spell going into the already dominant archetype, and already the most hated archetype in Standard. We were hoping that Innistrad Crimson Vow was going to reduce the dominance of Alrund's Epiphany in Standard, not give the Alrund's Epiphany decks another extra turn spell to take advantage of. The good news is, it's not a super good extra turn spell. The upside of damage not being prevented is pretty small. It's definitely not the upside of making a couple birds that can jump and can attack. And so it's kind of just a 7-mana extra turn spell. But as I said, the concern is it's just more redundancy already going into one of the top decks in the meta. I think this is where it's going to fit. Like, if Alchemist Gambit has a home in Standard as far as top tier decks, it's going to be just slotted in alongside Galvanic Iteration. Now, if you get up to 8 mana to 9 mana, you're always going to have the extra turn spell. If you play 6, 7, 8 of them in your deck with Alchemist Gambit alongside Alrund's Epiphany, and that sounds absolutely miserable. If anything, maybe Alchemist Gambit is the card that gets Epiphany banned. Like, this actually, maybe this is a good thing. Hear me out. Maybe this convinces Wizards to ban Alrund Epiphany, and people won't completely lose their Izzet decks because they can still just replace Alrund's Epiphany with the worst but still very similar Alchemist Gambit and not have that consistency and not get the bird tokens and not be able to beat discard as easily. So maybe that's what ends up happening, is Epiphany gets banned and Alchemist Gambit sticks around. But as for now, I am not looking forward to playing against Izzet decks that can have up to 8 extra turn spells. The other thing is, in the Izzet Dragon builds of this deck, you might actually cast it in the 3 mana mode sometimes. Like, if you build a big board with Goldspan Dragon and you're making the extra treasures, you might know, like, my opponent's tapped down, I can cast this Alchemist Gambit, and I'm going to win the game during this turn. I'll attack my Goldspan, use my treasure mana plus a land to cast Gambit, take an extra turn, untap, play another Goldspan, attack for 8, win the game on the spot, maybe cast a burn spell or something. So I think there will be situations in the Izzet Dragon deck where you actually can just play this in the 3 mana mode pretty confidently, because you play it because it's the 7 mana mode for the cleave cost, because you know that you want that extra turn spell. But then there will be times when you're just like able to cast it for 3 mana and win the game on the spot. So that's the downside of Alchemist Gambit. It's another extra turn spell. It could improve the Elrond's Epiphany decks that are already at the top of Standard, and everyone hates losing to extra turns. Like, that is one of the least liked play patterns in Standard right now. But there are things I like about this card. As I mentioned at the beginning, if we didn't have the cleave cost, and this was just 3 mana, take an extra turn, lose at the end of that turn, I would actually find that a pretty fun card. Like, there's ways you can build around it, janky, fun ways. You could try to, like, Book of Exalted Deeds combo to live forever and then take a bunch of extra turns. Probably the best way is just Overcharged Amalgam, which can stifle something when it comes into play. It's even right on curve. You Alchemist Gambit, take an extra turn, end of that turn, flash in Overcharged Amalgam to stifle the lose the game trigger, hopefully sacking like a Decay Zombie or an Eye Twitch or something, and you get that extra turn for 3 mana for free. Like, that's actually kind of a cool play pattern. It's risky, things can go wrong if your opponent counters your Overcharged Amalgam or something, or kills the creature you want to exploit, then you're going to lose the game. So there's a lot of risk there. So I think that aspect of Alchemist Gambit is really interesting, and it could do some fun things in older formats. We've seen some really janky but super fun decks use like Glorious End, Chance for Glory, these cheap 3 mana extra turn spells with the same drawback alongside Gideon of the Trials Emblems, or like Tail's End is another stifly counter spell. Maybe we have a deck like that that just plays all these 3 mana extra turn spells along with ways to keep from dying to those extra turn spells, and that's actually like a really sweet idea. So I like some of the things that Alchemist Gambit supports. Like, if you took the cleave cost out of there, like maybe the brackets were around cleave rather than around the drawback, then this card would be sweet if this was just a 3 mana extra turn spell with the lose a game drawback. But as it is, Wizards. It's horrible timing for this. It's horrible timing. If this was printed at a time when Elrond's Epiphany was not dominating Standard, and when the biggest conversation about Standard was not about extra turn spells and how much players hate them, this would probably be fine. But it comes off really tone deaf and, you know, not being able to read the room releasing it right now. But as I mentioned before, from what we know about Wizards' work process, they design sets a year or two ahead of time. So there's just no way that they could hear the feedback from players about Elrond's Epiphany and about extra turns in Standard from the last like 3 months and not print Alchemist Gambit in Innistrad Crimson Vow. They cannot print an extra turn spell like a year from now, probably, based on the feedback to Alchemist Gambit and the feedback to Elrond's Epiphany, but they just can't react that quickly. They gotta print the cards, they gotta design the cards. It's a huge, big process that takes a lot of time, so you can't really blame Wizards for this one. I still think that they'll stop printing extra turn spells in Standard, but for the next year or so, it's gonna take time for these changes to filter through. So in the meantime, who knows what'll happen. So fingers crossed the Alchemist Gambit doesn't make Standard even more miserable. I want to build the janky fun deck around it, although I don't even know if I can at this point, because people just hate extra turns so much. Maybe even the janky fun, try to stifle the lose the game trigger mode is still just going to be something players don't want to see because they just hate extra turns so much. So we'll have to see, but certainly not what I was hoping to find when I started doing spoilers this morning. Another extra turn spell in the same colors as Elrond's Epiphany that already slots into one of the dominant decks in Standard, showing up in Innistrad Crimson Vow. We also got a pretty interesting mythic werewolf, Volatile Arsonist / Dire Strain Arcanist. So the front half, 5 mana 4/4 human werewolf, menace and haste. When it attacks, it pings up to 1 target creature, player, in Planeswalker, and then once you flip it, you get a 5/5 with menace and haste. And when it attacks, you get to deal 2 damage to up to 1 creature, player, and or Planeswalker. So Volatile Arcanist, I mean, this is a decent card. A 5 mana 4/4 menace haste, that's a lot of damage coming off the top of your deck, and you get to ping something. Maybe you can snipe a creature, and if it gets to flip, you get an even more damage. It's a 5/5 that's throwing 2 damage. That's a fast clock. The question is, Can this find its way into standard decks because it's competing with two really powerful cards? A lot of just generic mid-range decks are playing Goldspan Dragon, and honestly, as good as Volatile Arsonist is, I don't think it beats Goldspan Dragon in just like random mid-range piles. Goldspan is just so powerful. The treasure token is really strong, allowing you to leave up interaction in the same turn. Volatile Arsonist, while strong, is not quite as good as Goldspan Dragon in a generic deck, I don't think. The other issue is Wrenn and 7. A lot of decks are playing Wrenn and 7 with Azeka's Chariot. That's kind of their 5-drop slot, and Volatile Arcanist might not be able to beat that out either, and that's even a bigger concern for Volatile Arcanist, because the obvious home for this is Werewolf Tribal. Werewolf's getting more support, but even the Werewolf decks might be at their best playing Azeka's Chariot and Wrenn and 7 over Volatile Arsonist, so we'll have to see. You can see this as the top end of the Werewolf curve. Play your early game stuff, play your Tovolar, play your Arlen, play your Arsonist. Like, that's a scary, hasty card drawy curve. Whether or not it's good enough to beat out Wrenn and 7, to beat out Goldspan Dragon, remains to be seen. As far as the ping ability, hitting a Planeswalker, really matchup dependent. Hitting your opponent, that's never a bad thing. Getting in a little direct damage to help you close out the game. As far as pinging a creature, it's actually kind of relevant. If you look at the 20 most played creatures in Standard, there's actually a reasonable number that 1 damage will kill. It'll kill Malevolent Hermit, it'll kill Elite Spellbinder, Tajuru Blade Blight, which is actually kind of annoying if you're playing a werewolf deck because it just blocks and kills all of your big stuff, so sniping that's relevant. Tangled Floral Hedron, Usher of the Fallen, some other mono white stuff depending on if it has counters from Luminarch Aspirant. So 1 damage does do a reasonable amount, but still, I don't think that 1 damage in pinging down a Hermit or pinging down a Spellbinder is necessarily enough to make it better than a Wrenn and 7, better than a Goldspan Dragon, and I'm not even sure if that's true for werewolves decks, which is the biggest concern. Like I said, like, there's no way this is replacing Goldspan in a generic, like, Rakdos mid-range deck or Temur mid-range deck. There's no way this is replacing Wrenn and 7 Azeka's Chariot in some just random Gruul pile, but it might have a chance in werewolves, but even there I'm not 100% sure. The one place I do think it'll see play, for sure, 1,000,000%, is werewolf commander decks, which are kind of on the rise thanks to Tovolar finally giving the tribe a good commander. And werewolves in commander, they suffer from the fact that there's just not that many good werewolves, and even if Volatile Arsonist is a little bit short of being a standard staple, which could end up happening, it is certainly one of the like 40 best werewolves ever printed. It's probably in the top like 10 or 15 of werewolves ever printed, so it's an easy staple for Tovolar and other werewolf commander decks. Standard, gonna have to wait and see. Maybe it's the top end in werewolves, although it might struggle to beat out a couple of the other 5-drops that already show up in that slot. We also got a pretty spicy red sorcery in Change of Fortune. So Change of Fortune, 4 mana red sorcery, discard your hand, then draw a card for each card you've discarded this turn. So on level 1, this card is similar to a lot of cards we've seen before. Shattered Perception, Collective Defiance, Fateful Showdown. These red cards that let you discard your hand and draw that many cards without any shenanigans or additional support. That is exactly what Change of Fortune does. You have 5 cards in hand, you discard them, you draw 5 cards. That is exactly what any of these other options would do. However, the way Change of Fortune is worded, it has more shenanigans than these other cards. Because it draws a card for each card you've discarded, maybe you can discard some cards earlier in other ways and really power up Change of Fortune. And we have a lot of options even in Standard, like Magnetic Channeler. Discards a card. Thrilling Discovery lets you discard 2 cards. Hartenfeld Horn of Bounty, the backside of Burgi, can let you discard essentially your entire hand. Illuminate History, you can get as a lesson. Moonveil Regent. So if you can discard some cards before you Change of Fortune, then this can be drawing you way more than the number of cards that you're discarding to Change of Fortune. Maybe you discard 2 or 3 cards to Harnfeld, and then you draw some extra cards and discard some extra cards, or discard a card to Magnetic Channeler. Then you can power it up, and this opens up some pseudo combo potential. Probably the sweetest thing you can do at Change of Fortune is copy it a bunch of times. Like, take this for example. Like, there's a bunch of options in Standard. Dual Strike, Teach by Example, Rutha, but the best is Galvanic Iteration. Let's say you Galvanic Iteration, flash back Galvanic Iteration, and then Change of Fortune. It's gonna be a lot of mana, I know, but still, let's say you pull this off. What's gonna happen is, and let's go back to having 5 cards in hand, because it does depend on how many cards. No other shenanigans, just Galvanic Iteration plus flash back into Change of Fortune. You got 5 cards in hand, so the first Change of Fortune is going to resolve. You discard 5 cards and draw 5 cards. Then the next copy of Change of Fortune is going to resolve. You're going to discard the 5 cards you just drew, but then you're going to draw 10 cards because you've discarded a total of 10 cards so far this turn, 5 and 5, then the third copy resolves. You're going to discard 10 cards, but then draw 20 cards, 5 and 5, and then 10. You've discarded 20 total cards. So if you can copy this a few times, you can essentially just draw your entire deck with a single change of fortune, which is kind of insane, especially if you add some payoffs into the mix. And we don't really have many or any that I could find in standard, but once you get back to historic and pioneer and modern or commander, you could have a Glinthorn Buccaneer, which pings each opponent every time you discard a card, or Sphinx's Tutelage, mills whenever you draw a card. If you can add any payoff essentially for you drawing cards or for discarding cards or both, then this change of fortune loop can potentially just win you the game on the spot, burn the table out, mill the table out. There's probably also some janky, crazy combos that you can pull off in like Commander or Legacy with like Underworld Breach and Lion's Eye Diamond, and just like using Lion's Eye Diamond to make the mana to keep recasting the change of fortune to draw more and more cards, with Underworld Breach allowing you to do all the escape stuff, and Shadow of Grave, also another really cool piece, allows you to return all the cards to your hand that you discarded or cycled this turn, so you can get back all the cards you discarded, change of fortune, then discard it again. It's also an instant, so there's probably some sort of weird combo that lets you just draw through your entire deck, although honestly, like, a lot of times this is because Underworld Breach is an insane combo piece rather than the other combo pieces. There's so many ways you can go infinite with the Underworld Breach. Is Change of Fortune like the best one? Probably not, but it is worth keeping in mind that you can definitely use this to draw your entire deck if you can keep flashing back mana or escaping mana with Underworld Breach and then recasting your Change of Fortune. Also, speaking of combos, which probably a commander thing, Mind Over Matter, pretty interesting, lets you discard a card to tap or untap an artifact, creature, or land, so you can like discard your hand to tap and untap a land, maybe a land that taps for multiple mana, and then Change of Fortune to refuel, and then maybe do it again, tap and untap, make a ton of mana, maybe Snapcaster or whatever to get your Change of Fortune back, or draw another copy and do it again. So there should be a way to just go infinite with Mind Over Matter, although again, similar to Underworld Breach, Mind Over Matter goes infinite with a lot of different things, so that might be because of Mind Over Matter rather than Change of Fortunes. I think in Commander, the other thing to do with this is just kind of double up your wheels. You cast a Wheel of Fortune, discard your hand, draw 7, then you Change of Fortune, discard your hand. You already discarded your first hand to Wheel of Fortune, so you're gonna draw like 14 or something. Same with Wheel of Misfortune if you don't want to spend the ridiculous amount of money. Wizards, reserve list. Get rid of the reserve list, give us more Wheel of Fortunes. But if you don't want to spend Wheel of Fortune prices, Wheel of Misfortune does get the job done. So Change of Fortune, I like this card. I don't know exactly what you do with it. There's definitely some combo potential, especially outside of Standard. In Standard, I guess you just draw your entire deck by copying it a bunch of times. Certainly a powerful effect, and as players start to brew around this set, I think Change of Fortune, it has potential to do some really interesting things in multiple formats. We also got Chandra Dressed to Kill, Planeswalker number 2 from the set, and Chandra Dressed to Kill. This card's actually pretty spicy. 3 mana, 3 loyalty, +1, add a red mana, deals 1 damage to up to 1 target player or planeswalker, +1 number 2, exile the top card of your library. If it's a red, you may cast it this turn. And then -7, exile the top 5 cards of your library. You may cast red spells from among them this turn, and you get an emblem with, whenever you cast a red spell, this emblem deals X damage to any target where X is the amount of mana spent to cast the spell. So Chandra Dressed to Kill, I think this card's actually very powerful, but also pretty narrow. As you can see, looking at its abilities, 2 of them specifically refer to red cards. So this isn't a Planeswalker that you can throw in a 3-color deck or a 5-color deck. You might not even really be able to play in most 2-color decks. I think you gotta be pretty close to mono red, but in a mono red deck, Chandra can be kind of insane. So 2 comparisons come to mind for Chandra Dressed to Kill. One is, it's kind of like a mini Chandra Torture Defiance. If you look at the abilities, you got a plus ability that makes a mana, only 1 when Chandra Torture Defiance makes 2, but still, you got a plus ability that exiles a card and lets you cast it for a turn. Neither lets you play lands. Of course, Dressed to Kill is restricted to only red cards and doesn't give damage, but kind of similar. And then an emblem that you can make that will win the game as you cast spells. So I can see the comparison. I don't think Chandra Dressed to Kill is as powerful as Chandra Torture Defiance, but it is a mana cheaper, which is a big deal. Another comparison is Jace Beleren. Jace Beleren, 3 mana planeswalker that draws you a ton of cards. Chandra Dressed to Kill in the right deck can do the same thing. It has a plus ability that draws cards. We talked about this yesterday with Sorin the Mirthless. Planeswalkers that have plus abilities that can generate card advantage traditionally have been pretty powerful in Standard, so I think that's a vote in favor of Chandra Dressed to Kill. Also, the +1 that makes mana can be relevant. It gets you from 3 to 5 to play like a Goldspan Dragon a turn early. Maybe if you aren't playing a mono red deck, which probably isn't advisable, something like Wrenn and 6 a turn early. So I think that Chandra Kill is actually a pretty powerful card, but as I said, I think you essentially need to be mono red to play this card. I don't think you can play this in 2, 3, 4, 5 color decks, maybe some 2 color decks if you're heavily weighted towards red, because the +1 to draw a card is the big payoff here. Like, that's the reason to play Chandra Kill. It doesn't defend itself, it doesn't offer removal. What it does is generates card advantage turn after turn after turn, and to really get that card advantage, you're gonna have to be mono red. You already don't get to play lands with it, which means you're already gonna be drawing a card, 66.7% of the time, somewhere in there. Your deck's probably at least 1/3 lands, maybe higher than that. So if you are a 2 color deck or a 3 color deck and you have non-land cards that are also whiffs with Chandra's draw a card +1, then the card gets much, much worse. The problem is we haven't really seen mono red be a thing in standard. It's been a very, very fringe thing, but it just hasn't been good enough. Can Chandra Kill maybe make mono red a thing? I think it's a possibility, because in mono red this card is kind of insane. The other place I'm hyped for is in older formats. I've been playing Chandra Tribal in Historic, and Chandra Kill seems perfect there. Its +1 ramp ability works with Chandra's Regulator. The card advantage is good. Light Up the Night, you got another Planeswalker to have loyalty to remove to kill your opponent. So Chandra Kill, it's one of my favorite style of Planeswalkers. It is a powerful Planeswalker, but it's narrow. The Planeswalkers that end up being problematic are the Okos of the world, which are powerful Planeswalkers that are good in basically any deck, like elking things and turning things into 3/3s. That's going to be good in essentially any style of deck. Chandra Kill is powerful, but to harness Chandra's power, you essentially got to be a mono red deck. So I think that this is a card that has a chance to see play in standard for sure, and maybe in some older formats as well, but you are basically only going to see it in mono red decks. Also worth mentioning, at 3 mana, this could be a sideboard all-star. If it doesn't make it in the main deck of something like mono red in standard, this could be a card that you play in the sideboard when you run into the control deck that can't easily pressure it, because the drawback of it is not good at defending itself. Like, this is not a Planeswalker that's going to snipe down your opponent's creatures, keep its loyalty high, but against a control deck that doesn't have a lot of creatures to attack down your Planeswalker's loyalty, you sneak this in under the counter spells and then just plus, generate card advantage, hit that emblem, and that's going to win you the game. So I think that's a floor for Chandra, is sideboard all-star for mono red decks, and the ceiling is main deck all-star for mono red decks. So not a generically powerful Planeswalker for every deck, but in the right deck, Chandra Kill, very playable and potentially even very strong. Next up, we have a pretty interesting legendary vampire / Kraken horror, Runo Stromkirk / Crothis, Lord of the Deep. So Runo, the front half, a 3 mana Dimir legendary 1/4 vampire cleric. It is flying. When it enters the battlefield, put up to 1 target creature from your graveyard on top of your library. Then at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You can reveal the card. If it's a creature with mana value 6 or later, transform it into Crothis, Lord of the Deep, a legendary Kraken horror, a 3/5 with flying. When it attacks, create a tapped and attacking token copy of another attacking creature. If it's a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpent, create 2 of those tokens instead. So Runo Stromkirk, it's definitely an interesting card. The first ability of coming into play and putting a creature on top of your deck, not a great comparison. It's kind of like Druka's Scavenger is the closest I could find, but we really haven't seen this ability before. But obviously the idea is it can support the flipping of Runo. You play Runo, hopefully you got something big in your graveyard to put it on top. Next turn you can flip it around, and then you get like this super upgraded Flame Rush Rider where you get a big flyer, then when it attacks you get a token copy of another attacking creature. However, it sticks around. The big upside of Crothis is you're getting that token copy permanently. It's not until end of combat or anything like that. And then obviously if you manage to hit one of the tribes it cares about, one of the big sea creature tribes, then it's kind of absurd. So as far as standard is concerned, I feel like this card's going to be very difficult to use. I looked at the 50 most played creatures in standard right now, and there were three out of the 50 that had mana value of 6 or greater: Cyclone Summoner, Inferno of Starmounts, and Coma Cosmo Serpent. So there's just not a lot of huge creatures that see play, which isn't necessarily a deal breaker for Runo. What it means is there's not a deck you can just slot this into. It's not like the extra turn spell we were talking about, where, oh, you stick it into Is It Turns and it's going to be good. With Runo, you're probably going to have to build a deck around it. There isn't a pre-existing shell that can take advantage of Runo. That said, you could build a deck around it. Maybe it's some sort of Sultai deck with like Lord of the Forsaken and Burning Room Demon as your big creatures. Then you get self-mill like Eccentric Farmer and Old Stick Fingers. All you really need is to get one big thing in the graveyard, and then Runo can do the rest, putting it on on top, flipping it around, and once it flips around, it's kind of insane. Like, even just looking at these creatures that we have right now, imagine attacking with Runo, well, actually Crothis after it flips, and getting a copy of Burning Room Demon, which then tutors up something and puts something else in your graveyard, or another Lord of the Forsaken. So you're attacking with two of those. Like, if you do manage to flip this and attack with it, the reward is really high. You're just going to smash people for a ridiculous amount of damage. So definitely a build around for Standard with no obvious home. As far as its tribes, the Kraken, Leviathan, Octopuses, and Serpents, not a lot of options in Standard. What you're looking at right now is literally all of those tribe members that are currently legal in Standard. Some of them are pretty good. Coma is a really good card. Icebreaker Kraken is an okay card. Those two are probably the best with Runo since they're big enough to flip it as well. But there's also like Cherix, Verazal, Wormhole Serpent. The problem is, many of these are legendary, and that's something you're going to have to keep an eye on. Like, copying a Coma isn't actually very good because you're just going to legend rule yourself for Cherix or Verazal. So there's really limited options in Standard. Maybe we get some more in Innistrad Crimson Bow, but for now, I think this is a card that's not really designed for Standard. Not that we can't build a sweet, fun deck around it, but there's just really not a lot of support for what Runo Stromkirk is trying to do in Standard. Where I think this is going to shine and be super fun is as a commander. I think this leads your Dimir Sea Creature deck with your Quest for Ula's Temples and your Whelming Waves, and it's going to be really fun to play in Commander. In Commander, you can ramp into your big things. You can easily fill the graveyard with Entombs and Buried Alives to get a big thing in the graveyard. Then you play Runo and put it on top, and then you flip it, and then you just start smashing your opponent with huge Serpent of Yawning Depths and Tidal Krakens and Trench Quarters and Stormtide Leviathan. So I think as a commander, this card is going to be really, really sweet. So Runo Stromkirk, it's a sweet card. I like this card. I don't think it's really a card designed to see Standard play, although we're definitely going to try to build a deck around it for Budget Magic or Against Odds or something, because it is really fun, but it just doesn't have a lot of support. The stuff it cares about, really expensive creatures and sea monster tribes, just aren't things we have a lot of in Standard or very competitive in Standard. So who knows? Maybe someone figures out a way to break it in Standard, but for now, I think that Runo Stromkirk and Crothis, Lord of the Deep, going to be a really popular, fun build around sea creature commander. Next up, we have a card that, stop me if you've heard this one before, is gonna be good in Soul Sisters, but this time it really is. I swear. I know I say this every spoiler season, but Voice of the Blessed, this is finally the card that is gonna prove me right. If you predict a card is gonna be good in Soul Sisters every single set, by the law averages, sooner or later Wizards is just accidentally gonna print a card that actually is good in Soul Sisters, and then you look like a genius, and it's finally happened in Innistrad Crimson Vow. Voice of the Blessed is kind of insane. Double white mana for a 2/2 Spirit Cleric. When you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on it. As long as it has 4 more counters on it, so it'll be a 6/6, it has flying and vigilance, and as long as it has 10 or more counters on it, it also gains indestructible. This is the best Ajani's Pridemate that we have ever seen. This is absolutely ridiculously insane. And this card does a whole bunch of different things. Ajani's Pridemate still sees play in Historic, and it has in Standard when it's been around. This is a card that I think is going to have the impact across multiple formats. If you are playing Ajani's Pridemate in a deck right now, replace it with Voice of the Blessed. Like, seriously, it is the hugest upgrade. It is really absurd how good this is compared to Johnny's Pridemate, or just play both of them and have that redundancy. So as far as Standard is concerned, we already got a Fringe deck that uses Trelisara as a Johnny's Pridemate, basically the same thing as Voice of the Blessed, but legendary. And we have like Lunarch Veteran, Prosperous Innkeeper as our Soul Sisters. We have Righteous Valkyrie as a huge life gain payoff. So the pieces are here for green-white life gain to be a deck in Standard. Voice of the Blessed is even a cleric, so it works with Righteous Valkyrie. So this is something to keep an eye out for. We'll see how good the deck is, but I think with Voice of the Blessed and Trelisara and all these support pieces, I think there's a shot that some sort of green-white Soul Sister life gain deck could actually be pretty competitive in Standard. The same is true, plus, when you go back to older formats. You also get a Johnny's Pridemate in the mix, plus you get like Soul Wardens and Soul Attendants. There's already a fairly competitive green-white Collected Company life gain deck in Historic. Voice of the Blessed, such a massive upgrade there over a Johnny's Pridemate. We haven't really seen Soul Sisters be successful in Modern in a while, but if they do, and they're going to play a Johnny's Pridemate, Voice of the Blessed takes that role instead. The ability to upgrade into a vigilant, flying, indestructible creature is not to be underestimated. It is really powerful. The other thing worth mentioning about Voice of the Blessed, and then I'm going to stop rambling because it really is just like a Johnny's Pridemate, but super duper 2021 power crap. Really synergistic with Heliod Suncrown. That's the other life gain deck that we see, is Heliod deck. decks that are like Soul Sisters life gain style decks, but also have Heliod combo kills built in. Well, one of the tricks to powering up Voice of the Blessed is using Heliod to put the counters on it, and that's going to let you rush into the 4 counters and the 10 counters much more quickly to protect it and make it better and make it evasive. So I think that's another home for this card. Heliod combo decks where you just play this as an absurd 2-drop. So Voice of the Blessed, it's going to be good in Soul Sisters. It really is this time. This card is insane. I think it can make Soul Sister style decks a thing in Standard. I think it can power up the archetype in Historic. And who knows, maybe it could even bring it back in Modern, although I'm less sure about Modern Soul Sisters making a comeback. We also got another ridiculous Mythic Dragon, Manaform Hellkite. So 4 mana, 4/4 Dragon. It has flying, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX Dragon Illusion creature token with flying and haste where X's amount of mana spent to cast this spell, exile that token at the beginning of the next end step. This card is pretty bonkers. It is essentially a Shark Typhoon or a Metallurgic Summonings on a 4/4 flying body. You cast the non-creature spells, you get these huge tokens. The twist is Manaform Hellkite is much more aggressive. Shark Typhoon and Metallurgic Summonings, they make the same massive tokens. However, they are summoning sick. Manaform Hellkite, you get the upside of haste, so you get to smash your opponent right away. The downside is you only get the tokens for a turn, so they don't stick around and play defense as well as like Shark Typhoon does, although you can still block with the tokens. You can cast spells during your opponent's turn to like jump block or whatever if you need to. So Manaform Hellkite, where I'm most scared of this card, and I'm scared of it in multiple places, but is in the Elrond's Epiphany decks. We've seen the Elrond's Epiphany decks playing Smoldering Egg. As a payoff, you cast an Epiphany and you flip it, and then it's a 4/4. Manaform Hellkite seems even scarier to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like Manaform Hellkite is just absurd in the Epiphany and now Alchemist Gambit's deck. You play your Manaform Hellkite, then you cast Elrond's Epiphany, and you get 2 birds, and you get a hasty 6/6 that you smash your opponent with. That's a lot of damage, just like the Elrond's Epiphany Foretold 6 mana massive hasty flyer plus Manaform Hellkite. That's 10 damage all by itself, and then maybe you cast Alchemist Gambit, and remember, it triggers on the amount of mana spent, not the mana cost. So if you cleave an Alchemist Gambit, it's going to be 7. You're going to get a 7/7 hasty token to smash your opponent with. So this card seems designed to be the payoff in the win condition in an extra turn style decks. You just loop a couple extra turns, smash with a huge hasty evasive Dragon Illusions, win the game on the spot. The other thing I want to mention about this card is the way it's worded. You exile the tokens at the beginning of the next end step. So it might seem bad with instants, because if you cast a spell like during your opponent's turn, it's going to go away before you get to attack with it. But there is a trick to get around this. If you wait until your opponent's end step, the beginning of the next end step has already passed, you can like Memory Deluge, make a token, and then when you untap, the Dragon Illusion token is going to stick around for your turn. You'll lose it on your end step, but you're going to have it to attack with for a turn. So that's something to keep in mind if you're playing like a Is It Dragon style deck and you have all these instant speed card draw spells. Casting them on your opponent's end step is a way that you can make a Dragon Illusion token that you can actually use as an attacker for a turn, and then still have all your mana up to cast Elrond's Epiphany or Alchemist Gambit or whatever to close out the game. So it seems really insane in the Is It Spell style decks. Other possibilities, maybe some sort of Magecraft deck. It kind of cares about the same things as Magecraft creatures, casting non-creature spells. So maybe there's, I don't know, Boros with Leonin Lightscribe to pump the Dragon Illusions. Maybe it's some sort of Rakdos deck with Stormkills and Sedgemoor Witches, but there is Spellslinger payoffs in Standard. Another option could be some sort of like weird mono red deck with Moonveil Regent, where you use Moonveil Regent to generate the cards you need to keep casting spells, and then Manaform Hellkite makes the tokens you need to actually kill your opponent. So maybe there's some mono red Spellslinger deck available. There's tons of possibilities with this card. The other place where this card is an easy all-star is in Commander Spellslinger decks. If you're playing Vadrik or Nim Mizzet or Kuiker, I feel like this is just going to be one of the best payoffs in your deck. You play it, you cast a bunch of spells, you draw a bunch of cards, do what you're doing anyway, and just make this massive board full of Dragon Illusions to smash someone to death with. It gets even better if you throw something like Dragon Tempest into the mix. You're casting spells that are making dragons, and then those dragons are dealing ridiculous amounts of damage, or Pandemonium War Storm Surge should double up the damage. If you want to go really deep, you can even end your turn with the exile your Dragon Illusion token trigger on the stack on your end step, and keep those tokens forever with something like Obeka or Sundial to Infinite. So Manaform Hellkite, The card's great. I'm scared of this card in Standard. I think it's a commander staple. It's really, really powerful, super aggressive, great Spellslinger style payoff, and probably going to do a lot of work in a few different formats. Finally today, in the realm of lower rarity cards, we got another important vampire piece. Vampire's Vengeance, 3 mana instant, 2 damage to each non-vampire creature token, and you get a blood token as a bonus. So Vampire's Vengeance, I imagine that this is a sideboard all-star for vampire decks, where you can play this as a sweeper that is not going to kill your Falkenrath Pit Fighters or Valentines or Vampire Socialite, your other small vampires. Plus, you wreck the mono white deck, let's say, that's making a ton of spirit tokens that your vampires can't attack through, or the mono black kind of weird go wide token decks. So I don't know if the meta is in a place where you will main deck this in vampires, probably not, but I do think this is a card that vampire tribal decks will play heavily in the sideboard, in Standard for sure, and if there's Rakdos vampires in other formats, might see some play there as well. 3 mana for the Pyroclasm effect, a little bit much once you get back to like Modern, but still, we've seen similar cards, these Pyroclasms that don't hit your stuff if you're in a specific tribe or have a specific theme, see quite a bit of play in Standard in the past. We also got Dread Fugue, which is kind of interesting. It's like a bad Thoughtseize. 1 mana, target player reveals their hand, you can choose a non-land from it with mana value 2 or less and they discard it. You can cleave it for 3 mana and then you just straight up Thoughtseize without losing life. How good this will be, I'm not really sure. 2 or less is a pretty big restriction. If it was 3 or less, then this card would be kind of insane, because then it would be Inquisition of Kozilek with upside. With mana value being 2 or less, is that enough? It still hits a lot in some matchups, but it's not going to hit a Saw It Coming, which a Inquisition of Kozilek could do. So we'll have to see. I'm not sure if this is in the conversation in other formats. This is a card that's going to take some real evaluation, digging into the mana values of various formats to see how big the difference between this and Inquisition of Kozilek ends up being, but definitely worth keeping in mind. It is good at sniping things against aggro, and I guess if you got nothing else to do with your mana, a 3 mana Thoughtseize is a thing you can do. Otherwise, just a bunch of draft chaff type filler stuff. Nothing super exciting as far as constructed, but you can find it all over at mtgpreviews.com if you're interested. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our daily Innistrad Crypts and Vows spoilers for today. So let me know what you think. What do you think about all these sweet cards today? How hyped are you for this amazing looking set? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll be back tomorrow with more daily Innistrad Crypts and Vows spoilers. So until then, have a spectacular day, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.